Hello everyone, this is Joe W. Today, I'm going to do a brief review on these 4 Special Now spin-offs. Now That's Like Cool Music Decades, the Deluxe Edition, came out in 2003 to celebrate 20 years of Now That's Like Cool Music, although I would call this album now 20 years really, because this album only shows 2.5 decades of this album. The front cover looks pretty good. I like the colouring of the logo, and the background looks pretty cool too. 60 number ones from 1983 to 2003. Over 20 years of the top chart hits. And here's the Now Pig mascot, which is pretty cool. And I like how the discs are in sections, like disc 1 focuses on 1983 to 1989. Disc 2 focuses on 1990 to 1996. And disc 3 focuses on 1996 to 2003. I like the selection of songs as well, most of them from the numbered Now albums, while some of them aren't on the numbered albums to begin with. And we have a rare occasion of Let's Dance by David Bowie being on an album, which is really cool. And also Independent Woman, Part 1 by Destiny's Child. Yeah, so really good selection of the track list overall. Here's disc 1. And at the back we have some artworks of other numbers Now albums. I don't have a booklet, by the way. It's a second hand, by the way. Here's disc 2 and disc 3. And here's more artworks of Now That's Like Cool Music albums. Overall, Now Decades is a special way to celebrate 20 years of Now That's Like Cool Music, and it's a good track list as well. Right, moving on to Now That's Like Cool 25 Years, which came out in 2008, of course celebrating 25 years of Now That's Like Cool Music. And the front cover looks really cool. I like the fact the logo's in front of a lot of Now album artworks. I like the colouring of the logo as well. And we have the Now Pig mascot on the top of the logo, like it was on Now 3 and Now 4. And of course Now 5, although it's on the side. 3 CDs. 60 songs on this album as well. I like how the discs are broken down into each decade. Disc 1, 1980s. Disc 2, 1990s, even though Tina Turner, Belinda Carlisle and Proclaimers songs are 1980s as well. And disc 3, 2000s. Of course, this is Way to Rambalolo. We entered in 2005 to number 1. I like the selection of the tracks as well, most of them from numbers Now albums, although a few of the 80s songs weren't on the Now albums to begin with, and it's one of those rare occasions we see Michael Jackson's Thriller on an Now album, which is really cool. And I think this is the first time this song was on a Now album. Of course, It's a Sin also, of course, appeared on Now Yearbook 85 to 89, the final chapter as well. So, really good selection overall. I like the song choices. Here's disc 1, and of course we got the booklet, which I'll get to in a minute. Here are discs 2 and 3. Of course, disc 3 doesn't hold very well in the case, but it's still safe. Here is the booklet. Has information from Ash Rayburn, who used to compile Now albums until Now 81. And we have some copyright information of each song as well. Of course, the artworks of Now's 1 to 71. Now 25 Years is another special Now album to me. Celebrates 25 years of Now That's Like Cool Music, a really good track list also. Let's move on to Now That's Like Cool 30 Years, which came out in 2013, celebrating 30 years of Now That's Like Cool Music. I like how this album cover is a reference to 20th Century Fox, but Now 30 Years logo looks really cool on a podium with spotlights around it, and of course we've got the pig balloons around it, one of them in sunglasses, represents the mascot, the Now Pig. This album also has 60 songs. I like how 3 discs are broken down into sections as well, like disc 1, 1983 to 1996, disc 2, 1997 to 2007, disc 3, 2008 to 2013. A lot of good selections as well, most of from the numbered Now albums, so some are not from the numbered Now albums to begin with, like disc 1. I like how it starts with Michael Jackson, Billie Jean, and we have songs that we don't usually see on Now albums as well, like Dancing in the Street by David Bowie and Mick Jagger, You Win Again by Bee Gees. Even Madonna's on the album, who doesn't usually get licensed, with Into the Groove. So a lot of good selections on this album. And I'm surprised When I Was Your Man by Bruno Mars wasn't on 95 after this album came out. Though one of the latest ones was Let's Get Ready to Rumble by PJ and Duncan, which we entered 2013, of course. and it's on Now 85, so surprised Bruno Mars wasn't on it either, but he was on it with Treasure. Here are the artworks for Now That's I Call Music 1 and Now That's I Call Music 84. Here's the Now That's I Call Music poster, which inspired Richard Branson to make the series. Disc 1, Disc 2, Disc 3. Of course, behind the discs are copyright information. Here is the booklet. The Now story, of course. And I'm the #1 Now fan. Gets your chance to get your name printed on the artwork for Now 85. Of course, someone got their name on it. 30 years Now That's I Call Music. I like the information's on it. And I like the fact Now 100 was released in 2018 like they predicted. And here's the Now Running app advertisement. I don't think it exists anymore. And here's an advertisement for Now That's I Call Music 85. Another really special Now spin-off, this time focused on 30 years of Now That's I Call Music. Right, moving on to Now That's I Call Now, 100 Hits from 100 Nows, which came out in 2018, of course celebrating the 100th release of Now That's I Call Music. Now this is a really special concept. I like the fact the logo has a lot of Now album artworks in the logo, and at the back we get more Now album artworks, which looks really cool to me. Here are the 100 tracks selected. I like the fact the booklet and all the discs are kept in a special box, which looks really cool. We'll get to the booklet in a minute. And I like how all the discs are all in these cardboard sleeves. Each of them are from 20 albums each. Here's disc 1, and here's the track list at the back. I'll show you each disc as well. Here's disc 1 in blue. Right, here's disc 2, the track list. Disc 2 in orange. Here's disc 3, the track list. Disc 3 in pink. Here is disc 4. And here's disc 4 in light blue. And here's disc 5. And here's disc 5 in red. Here is the booklet. We get an advertisement for no longer existing Now app. We get information about each song from the 100 Now albums. And get pictures of artists and song artworks. Here are all 100 Now albums. For Now Music on all these social medias. Overall, a brilliant concept for this album, having 100 hits from each of the 100 Nows. Really special way to celebrate 100 years of Now That's I Call Music. Well, I hope you enjoyed this brief review on these 4 special Now spin-offs. I'll see you next video.